Good evening,
Wow.
everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ben Raskin. I'm the head of Agroforestry at the Soil Association and very excited about tonight. Apologies for those of you that tried to join us last week. We had, unfortunately, a technology fail. We were all sat there waiting for everyone to join us and nobody came, and we were not quite sure what happened. But anyway, I'm hoping that it was not too much of a problem for you all to join tonight. So thank you for coming back. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. You'll see there's a Q&A and a chat. So the Q&A, if you can use that just for questions for the panelists for the question and answer at the end. Anything else can go in the chat. I know there's lots of expertise. I've already had a quick look at some of the people that are attending, and there's lots of expertise there. So as well as our wonderful panelists, I'm sure there's going to be lots of interesting discussion amongst you all. So do feel free to pop thoughts and comments and other stuff in the chat, as well as questions for yeah, I think Anna's going to undisable the chat in a minute. So that should be fine. The other thing that's going to happen, we're going to use a bit of Menti to ask you some questions, make sure you're still awake at various points during tonight. So there'll be a link, again, a link in the chat and a QR code on the screen. So do log into the Menti, and then if you want to join in with that, that'd be great. Some of it's just for fun, and there's a couple of questions that would be really helpful to give us a bit of data on stuff. So I think that's the housekeeping. Thank you again for coming twice. We've got this wonderful panel lined up this evening looking at trees and pollinators. We've called it Trees and Bees, or Bees and Trees, partly because it's a good rhyme, and partly because obviously bees are super important, but there's also lots of other invertebrates that are really important as well. So it won't be just about bees, even though they're the stars of the show. And we got three great speakers. We've got Sarah Holdsworth, who will kick us off. And Sarah really is responsible for all of this and for getting me inspired, certainly, about it when we worked with her on her Act for Future project, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. Sarah runs a plant nursery in Somerset, Be Happy Plants. And so rather like the Lorax, Sarah is going to be talking for the trees tonight. After that, we're going to have Vicki Hird, who I'm sure a lot of you already know, who is an author of one, soon to be two books. I think that's right, isn't it, Vicki? And she's going to talk about things from the bugs perspective. And then finally, we've got Mark Lee, who is one of the country's best organic farmers, and he's going to share his experience of using trees within his farming system to boost what is already an impressive provision of pollinators on his farm. My job is to try and keep the whole thing on the road and moving, and as I say, asking the questions occasionally as we go through. And assuming that all of our speakers keep well to time, we should have plenty of time at the end for a bit of panel discussion and questions and answers from you. And I can see lots of you already introducing yourself in the chat, so that's great. Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's the slide I should have been talking over. Right, first question. So if you go onto Menti, you can either just use the QR code there, or you can log onto menti.com and put in that number. And the first question is to tell me which of those two flowers is being pollinated. So they're the same tree, and one of them has been pollinated and one hasn't. Anyone know which is which? And will it come up, Anna? Will we see? Oh, there we go. The dots are all cool. There we go. I'm glad Anna's running the technology on. Oh, evenly split so far.
Yeah, you can see 8 out of 15, 8 out of 16. So good. That means that people are being able to join. And you can see where the bulk of the dots are. Ben.
Yeah, so the left is the more popular one.
I love that Sarah and Vicki are keeping their poker faces there, not giving anything away. I think I think that's enough, Ben.
Okay, so Sarah, I'm going to introduce you, and you can tell us which is the pollinated and which is the not pollinated, and then we can hear your whole talk.
Okay, well, the one on the left has been pollinated, and the flower is looking a bit tired. It's lost its colour, and it will have also lost its smell and pheromones for the bees to smell that it has nectar. Okay, so shall I start? The first question we have is, why are trees beneficial to pollinators so important now? So pollinators have been declining exponentially since the 1960s. Nowadays, they're too often starving, if not poisoned. Dwindling natural habitats and undisturbed wild places. Farming intensification, use of pesticides, fungicides and nerve agents, especially harmful to bees. Hedges cut back too hard, not allowing hedgerow to flower. Agroforestry trees are important not only for the flowers and forage they themselves produce, but also for retaining moisture in the shady soil around them, so that other flowers and shrubs around can continue to produce nectar. If exposed to drought, plants cannot readily produce nectar. Some trees only have nectar flow when there is sufficient rain or moisture, such as in woodland, for example, hawthorn, for example. One mature tree, such as linden, lime, or sycamore in flower, can provide an acre of forage in the sky. But trees are only resilient to extreme winds or drought when grouped, shaded and sheltered by each other, as in a copse, woodland, or lines sheltered by shelter belts. How will trees and pollinators be affected by climate change, and what changes can we expect? Unpredictable future climate, extreme events such as we've recently seen, long periods of rain and flooding, followed by drought and exceptionally high summer temperatures. But this doesn't necessarily mean higher winter temperatures. Recent scientific evidence has it that the AMOC, Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, on which the British Isles climate hinges, is now believed to be shifting with potentially colder than average winters. All this poses a conundrum for tree planting. We cannot simply say we're shifting into a warmer climate and say plant species of provenance from the south of Britain, southern Europe, or the Mediterranean. Many of these trees will not stand waterlogging or super cold, wet and windy winters. Hotter summers and human activity are spreading more pests, tree pests and diseases, as we have already seen. Ash dieback, larch dieback, oak decline, Phytophthora diseases, which are waterborne moulds, spread by wind-driven rain drift or human movement, which is already in the British Isles, puts about 150 species at risk, especially these trees, ash, beech, sweet chestnut, larch, white willow, but others are susceptible, such as oak, holly, strawberry tree, this one, arbutus. Now, this is not to say we shouldn't plant them. In fact, the reverse is true. We absolutely must plant as many of these at-risk trees as we can. The wild species, healthy wild seed, as inevitably some will have naturally disease-resistant genes, and we need to find and care for these precious trees and correctly manage any sick trees. Almond, plum, peach, etc., which bees rely on. The number of other species at risk. Oh, sorry, I don't think I've quite finished this. Other pests and diseases are threatening to arrive, such as Xylella fastidiosa, which have wiped out olive groves and vineyards in Europe. This affects many of the Mediterranean species, such as lavender and rosemary, and all the prunus species, such as cherry, almond, plum, peach, which bees rely on. The number of other species at risk is approximately 700 in Europe. And the Asian hornet is a major pest threat which could threaten bees. Asian hornets actively seek out the bees as food for their growing young and can wipe out an entire colony in minutes of both wild and managed bees. Why are bees so important? They are our major pollinators. All species of bees feed on pollen and nectar for their entire life cycle and are the only insects actively foraging pollen for their young. They also have the most powerful bodies, adults flying miles each day. In contrast, butterflies, for example, only feed on nectar, thus pollinating, for approximately 2 weeks of their life cycle. So what does the solution look like? Apart from being vigilant about not spreading plant and tree pests and diseases, what can we do? Number one, we need to plant more trees, using wild species seed with capacity to evolve resistance to pests and diseases and climate change. Trees which will thrive in your specific site and soil, that gives these trees an advantage from the word go. We need to get away from monocultures. We need mixed stands of trees which flower at different times, and we need to make sure there's forage for pollinators all through the seasons, early to late spring, early to late summer, and early winter. There are some species, actually sweet chestnut is a July flowering tree. There are some species which tolerate many of the likely climate changes, such as sweet chestnut. And of these, most of them have potential for farmers with diversification income for produce ranging from timber to chestnuts to medicinal honey, for which there may be huge demand once antibiotics as we know them become useless. And antibacterial resistant superbugs will boom in the warmer climate. A few species to consider growing are arbutus, strawberry trees, sweet chestnuts, manuka, lindum, small-leaved lime, and even sycamore is a very important one, and even English oak. If manuka honey is considered, it is imperative to understand why this must be done to organic standards. This is to minimize, we can't completely prevent, but to minimize contamination with pesticides, which would ultimately cause colony decline. Also, manuka honey is used within hospitals and endorsed as having good antimicrobial activity against antibiotic sensitive and antibiotic resistant bacteria. Pharmaceuticals, which make the hospital grade manuka dressings, insist on high standards of purity without residues from chemical pesticides. And Dr. Rowena Jenkins, she's a researcher at the Surgical Materials Testing Lab, emphasizes that medical grade manuka honey must be uncontaminated with toxic pesticides. This will also avoid negatively impacting wild bees. Also imperative is to grow other species of trees which provide forage for all the other months for your wild and managed bees. Manuka only flowers in June. So flowering times need to be covered by a range of species. So let's take a look at these, the major tree sources of nectar, pollen and honeydew for bees. I don't think we're seeing all of it, are we? Or this is just an example of it, because I think it'll be shared later.
It is just an example, and just wanted to let everyone know that Sarah has very kindly agreed to do a small presentation about it in more detail, so you won't be missing on anything.
Okay. So I'll just explain the importance of mixed stand of trees. Trees will only flower in their own flowering month for 1 month or 2 at most. Pollen is bees' only source of fat and protein and is the first food for larvae and enables queen bees of all species to lay eggs. Nectar is their primary source of carbohydrate energy, and floral nectar is preferred owing to its diverse nutrients. This energy source enables them to fly many miles while they gather pollen, nectar and honeydew, stored for winter as honey and fed to themselves and brood. Now, honeydew, which is very important as you'll hear, is their secondary source of carbohydrate. This is tree sap tapped into by sap-sucking insects such as aphids and forms as dew on their backs or on the leaves of the trees. It's a vital alternative source when nectar flow is scarce, such as in the dune gap, or during droughts when nectar doesn't flow. Honeydew will produce in significant quantities during this hot, dry weather, which also favours a build-up of sap-sucking insects. Right, I have a jar of, amazingly, this is oak tree honey. Can you see that? Everybody, can everybody see oak tree raw honey? So that is there we go, and that was produced in Greece during July. Because the amazing thing about oak trees is that they will produce this honeydew not just 1 or 2 months, but for about 6 or 7 months. They'll produce it. They produce honeydew, so it's a different thing. It's not a floral nectar. They'll produce it from July, August, in all hot weather, September. I think the very first one, I think it's June. Does oak start to flower in June? But anyway, that's why, and also sycamore will do the same thing. There are a few. Anyway, I'm diversifying. Sorry, I'll get back to the thing. Important honeydew trees are sycamore, oak, linden, lime, willow, beech, poplar. Aphids play a crucial role by producing honeydew, which can sustain bees and other pollinators during droughts. This highlights the importance of maintaining well-balanced biodiversity in the environment for the survival of beneficial insects and pollinators. And parting thought, trees not only are the best answer for all the world's and farming's major problems right now, they are the only solution to our major environmental problems. We humans absolutely need to plant more trees. Not any old tree, but the right tree for the right soil, for the future's unpredictable climate, and we need to plant them now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I'm so aware that we've only just scratched the surface of this, and I know how much more information you've got in your head. So we'll definitely try and capture more of that and make it available to people. But that's great, a great start to tonight. And yeah, as Anna said in the chat, do pop in questions or comments. We'll try and sort of keep track of it all and hold them there for the discussion at the end. So Anna, I think we've got another question for people, haven't we?
Yes, we have another question. And while I share it, I just wanted to mention again that Sarah has really, really nicely agreed to walk us through this amazing document that she has shared with us. We're going to be sharing the document, but also a short explanation of the document in video format soon. So for everyone to know that you've not missed on anything just yet. But in the meantime, people, Ben.
So the next question is, what we've got there is 2 bees and a hoverfly. So which is the hoverfly? Oh, you've got confident replies there.
Yeah, going for it. The Menti code, if you don't have it yet, sorry about that. I couldn't see it before because we have everything organized around the slides and the Menti. But as you can see, if you go to menti.com, the number is 43608079, or you can just use that QR code as if you were in a restaurant.
Nobody's going for the big one in the middle, I noticed.
Shocker. Poor lonely little dot.
Oh, thank you. Someone's given them that.
Vicki, you can be confident on your audience today.
Yeah.
Yes, I will tell you, when I put this, it took me a solid 5 minutes to find it.
So the number again is 43608079. Right. Thank you all. Vicki, would you like to reveal the true hoverfly?
Yeah, that everybody got it right, and I think those 2 people were just playing with us. It is the one on the right, but obviously it's a brilliant mimic, and I do a lot of talks about bugs and invertebrates because I want people to really be champions for them, and it's surprising how many people don't recognize which are the imposters, so to speak, or the mimics, I should say. They've got the yellow and black stripes, and people fear them and they might hurt them. And hoverflies are fantastic pollinators and pest predators. So it's great. People here know which is which. But yes, should we go to the next slide then? Yes. Shall I kick off then, Ben? Great. Yeah, so I work on agriculture policy and have done agriculture and food policy, and I'm currently at the Wildlife Trusts as strategic leader in agriculture. But my absolute passion is invertebrates, and as Ben said, I have written a book called Rebugging the Planet, and I'm writing another one, which is what I've been doing all day today, and my head is so full of the facts and figures. Like for instance, I read that one ant, queen ant, they know has lived for 30 years. A 30-year-old ant. Isn't that amazing? But my head is full of them. But the reason I love them so much is obviously they're absolutely the glue that keeps a lot of our ecosystems working, alongside fungi, I would say. But they're in trouble. Some studies, it depends on which studies you're looking at. There's some really dramatic ones, Insectageddon kind of things, and others that are a little bit more nuanced. But we are absolutely clear that they are in trouble. 2 and 3 bugs are in decline globally, according to some global meta studies. And it really varies on which ones you're talking about. The ones that are specialists that feed on particular species of tree or have particular habitat needs are more likely to be in trouble when we're with the kind of things that are affecting them than those that are generalists, like a fly or a cockroach that can live anywhere and eat anything. I'm generalizing here as well myself. But the big threats, as Sarah mentioned, one of them is climate change. You've got unstable temperatures, extremes of cold, heat, water, too much, too little, habitat loss, huge impact for the invertebrates. I've got a strange noise in the background. I don't know if that needs to be turned off or somebody needs to go on mute, but it's not here. That habitat loss is incredibly important, not just because of the individual habitats, say on farms or in cities, but also as loss of corridors. The way in which insects can, when they have young, those young can go and colonize somewhere else. They can only do it if they can move through a green corridor, be it a small hump of grass or a wood. And that's really important to make sure that we've got those corridors and refuges in urban as well as rural spaces. And of course, Sarah also mentioned the pollution and pesticides, chemicals, sewage pollution in aquatic systems, plastic, noise, light pollution, they're all having a big impact. And I was really shocked when I was reading about microplastics being ingested by insects and other invertebrates, thinking that they're food source and gumming up their insides. And I know somebody's doing research on that at the moment, and we're finding a lot of microplastics in bees, in their hives, on their bodies, in their honey. And then there's diseases that are invasive species that travel through global trade, imports of plants and soils and other materials. So all these are a massive problem. They're huge problems. And what we need is for governments to really act to govern so that we stop creating the environment which is so harmful. But obviously we can make a difference ourselves. I think one of the things that we need to do is to nag or bug our politicians to do the right thing. But by growing more trees, you're really supporting nature, helping increase the range and provision of microclimates, the niches and habitats, the corridors that I was talking about. Agroforestry systems can provide food, as Sarah was talking about, shelter, egg-laying sites, mating sites, all sort of really important things that other kinds of habitats don't necessarily provide, and connectivity, as I was saying. And they've also got the added advantage that as they grow, they take in carbon dioxide, carbon, store it, and so they're providing a means by which we can reduce the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, reduce climate change if we grow more trees, obviously in the right trees in the right place. But they have massive adaptation benefits as well. It's not just climate mitigation, it's not just drawing the carbon in, but they actually provide adaptation by helping soils become stabilized, resilient farming systems, be more resilient the more plants roots are in the system, and many other things. They create a great habitat for the underground species to do their thing, to support a more organic soil carbon, and therefore more storage of carbon, but also more stable soils, which are one of the critical things that we need to get right with climate change. And there's lots of evidence now that more trees in agroforestry can actually benefit the farmer or the grower by predating pests, not just by pollination, which we're talking about, absolutely brilliant, but they can predate pests in the field, in the growing field, because they provide the habitats which these predators, I'm trying to think about it. I mean, hoverfly is a good one. Their larvae can predate aphids, other beetles like ladybirds and lacewing. The trees will provide habitat for those predators of the pests that you don't want in your field. Next slide, please. I mean, there's so many win-wins with agroforestry and trees. I just wanted to share this because I think there's such an incredible variety of bee, and I could have this slide for any insect species. I've just been looking at ants today, and it's extraordinary, the variety of ants. But in the UK, there's 270 species of bee, and 250 of them are solitary. Most people think, oh, bees live in hives, they've got queens and they do all sorts of things. A lot of them are solitary. They do their own thing, they lay their eggs, they mate, and they do everything themselves. So they've got to have everything in place for them to do that, both in terms of food, but also in terms of habitats. 64% of all UK species of invertebrates, that's just to throw in why bugs matter. They're just incredibly important. But looking at the bees themselves, a lot of them actually nest in the soil and in things around the soil and things that trees can leave, like hollow stem, wall cavities, leaf matter, leaf litter is an incredibly important habitat for some bees. These are bees that I've just found in my 10 by 10 meter garden. So you see, if you provide the habitat and the food, the bees will come. That's the one on the top right is a masked bee. We've got a hairy-footed flower bee, a red mason bee, and a four-banded flower bee. And on the right, that one with the white dots, I was so pleased to find this one. It's a mourning bee, which I've never seen before. Absolutely stunning animal, quite big and beautiful. Anyway, I think they're all beautiful. I think you probably agree with me. But they all need, and because it's my garden, I've got a tiny London garden. I don't have many trees, although I am growing a plum tree, so I'm very much hoping it's not going to be affected by climate change, and it will give me some flowers for the bees. They do very well in London, plum trees. Several friends of mine have got a huge harvest this year. Next slide, please. So can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So one thing I'm actually learning about a lot at the moment for my book is how bees talk to trees and trees talk to bees. And we had an example of that earlier, where the the color of many flowers, and in fact, the example we had earlier was a horse chestnut, change after successful pollination. So they're telling the bees not to come to this flower because you'll be wasting your time. It's wasted energy. We need you to go and pollinate other flowers in the tree. The horse chestnut, it loses, it gains a different color when it's pollinated, as you saw earlier. And the one on the bottom shows the color example of color changes. UV light is a light that insects and particularly bees can see. They can see ultraviolet light. And so across the whole flowering world of plants, they've created incredible patterns that guide the bees to the flowers. And this is just one example of the dandelion. And you can see the UV light on the left-hand side directs the bees to the center of the flower. And there are many, many intricate examples of that in the whole flowering plant kingdom. Absolutely extraordinary. I'm learning every day. Obviously, they produce scent and fragrance that attract the bees when they're in bloom, and they'll stop producing it when they're not. Again, stop the bees wasting their time and other pollinators. They'll also use electricity. They have a negative charge, and the bees, as they're flying, create a positive charge. When the bee lands, the difference in the charge can make the pollen jump from the flower to the bee. And there are other examples of electricity with pollinators being used for helping pollination, helping guide insects in. And the plant will go positive a bit to deflect pollinators again, to stop them wasting their time. So again, talking, it's a conversation. One's listening, one's talking, and vice versa. And they'll obviously synchronize when they're flowering to coincide with the emergence of bees. But that relationship has evolved over time. But it's a beautiful one. It's an incredibly important one. And it's ants, it's spiders, it's many different flies, moths, night flying moths are now known to be incredibly important for pollination services in all our trees and flowers. So it's an incredible world out there. Obviously, bees are very important, and very important to recognize the role of wild bees and what you can do in your farm, in your growing plot, or in your garden. Even on your your window ledge, you can provide a habitat, a food source for those animals. Next slide, please. That might be the end. Can't remember. I probably talked too much. And I just wanted to end with diversity, because obviously diversity is absolutely key. And if you have diversity of the plants, you're going to get diversity of animals, and that creates more resilience, diversity of invertebrates. And these are just some examples of agroforestry I've noted over the ages. I don't own any of these pictures, I don't think, but that guy bottom right is a fantastic agroforestry expert and advocate, Steve Briggs, and he's been growing agroforestry, and he talks about it. And if you ever want to meet a farmer who really knows agroforestry, look up Stephen Briggs, or 4D farming, I think 4D farming, I think he calls it. But you can put in agroforestry, you can put animals, which also brings all sorts of other benefits for the bugs, dungs, etc. They'll eat differently. They'll manage the sward underneath the trees in ways that attract other animals, as do cows. And you can grow between agroforestry strips. I think this is at a wonderful Wakeling's agroforestry site. But diversity, whenever I give a talk, the big D is diversity. And we need that in our gardens, in our growing sites, in the fruit and vegetable growing sites, and in our farms. And agroforestry is absolutely key part. And what I'm so pleased about is that we've managed, the Soil Association, myself, and many other organizations have fought very hard to get support for farmers to do agroforestry. There is now support in place, grants both for putting agroforestry in, for maintaining it, and capital grants for all the capital items that you need to do, including deer protection, etc. So that's brilliant. The government has recognised all the benefits of agroforestry, and we're certainly not invented it. It's been done in the global south for hundreds of millions of years. Agroforestry has been a central part of growing food sustainably. So it's really exciting what we're going to see, hopefully, with all that support and understanding. And I think the last slide is just thank you and a few ideas. Yeah, so I did write Rebugging the Planet, and there's a website you can read some articles by me with lots of links, like how to do bugs with children, how to rebug your garden, rewild your garden. And I just wanted to show some other bugs I've found in my garden, because they're all pollinators and brilliant. And that's a hoverfly mimicking a hornet. And it's really big, and it bumbles around, and it's gorgeous. That one top right, the yellow and black. And then that is in a local apple orchard that's near me. It's a community apple orchard. That's a clearwing banded moth, which I was so thrilled to find. I've never seen one before or since. I was very excited. And on the left, there's a wasp, a bee wasp, which is a predator of bees, but also really important part of the ecosystem. I should probably stop there. But thanks for listening.
Amazing. Thank you, Vicki. Could listen to you all night, and I highly recommend the book, and I'm very much looking forward to the next book. So we're going to put a link, I think, in the chat for that as well. So thank you, and I'm sure you'll all got lots of questions after that. I can see already questions coming through, so we'll get to them after Mark. We've got one more Menti question, haven't we, somewhere? There we go. So this is I guess mainly aimed at those of you that are farmers, but potentially also those planting trees in gardens and allotments and things. So if when you're looking at trees and what trees to choose, do you think of pollinators, and is your choice affected by whether they'll be good for pollinators or how they might affect? Well, that's very good to see a lot of them thinking of it. Because I'm not, until quite recently, I'm not sure I did really. I mean, I knew that they were good for pollinators, but I don't think I was actively going, right, I'm going to choose this species over another because it's a good pollinator, or even more particularly, which is I think what Sarah's really got me into, is thinking about that all year round provision of nectar and pollen, and you know, how you can stretch the availability of it to support pollinators. That's the thing I think that I hadn't really got my head around at all. But I'm glad that there's no no's on that anyway. I think I was probably in the vaguely camp until a couple of years ago. Great. Thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Mark, and he's going to give us the farmer's view. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, good. I was also very glad to see no no's there. That would be a bad start, wouldn't it? Because that's really exactly what we're going to talk about, or I'm going to talk about now. My name's Mark Lee, and I farm in Shropshire with my wife, Liz. We have a mixed farm here that's been organic for 26 years now, so it feels almost like forever. And our aim is three things, really. We aim to produce nutritious human food as sustainably as we can, support the nature on our farm alongside that food production, very much within the food production. And like everybody's now talking about, sequester as much carbon as we can. We're already a carbon negative farm, but we feel we can do much better. So we will always be looking at ways that we can do better. With that in mind, we added our agroforestry just over a year ago, after dreaming of it for many years, visiting some of the farms that Vicki just mentioned there, Wakelins and Steve Briggs particularly, at Whitehall Farm over the last 20 years. But finally, we've done it just over a year ago, and we believe it will add greatly to all three of those aims, but particularly for nature. We planted 55 hectares of agroforestry, so just over 3,000 trees. We're a mixed farm, but our lays are short term, so our system is basically a silvo-arable system with fairly wide alleys, 30 or 36 metre alley widths, and 3 metre tree spacings in those avenues. But I'm going to talk about exactly what Ben just mentioned, really. I'm going to talk about how we chose the tree species for our system after considering the pollen and nectar on the farm, auditing it, if you like, that we were already providing for invertebrates, and looking for ways that we could improve that. So thanks, Anna. Next slide. The first thing I'm going to, on the left there is buckwheat, and it's an example of a flowering crop. We do grow some flowering crops. We don't grow buckwheat very often, and we don't grow much of it. It's certainly not a common crop, but it was worthy of putting in because I think it's the best. I can't imagine a better flowering crop, a cash crop for invertebrates. It's a fantastic plant. The field literally hums when we grow it. It just feels alive from top to bottom with insects, not just with plants. But it is a later sown crop, so it doesn't flower until August. This photograph was taken in August when it's at its peak. The poppy there is worthy of a mention, I think. It looks like a single poppy, but that's because buckwheat's a very vigorous and thick crop. But being an organic farm, we have an abundance of wild flowering plants, of course. Weeds, you might say. As hard as we try to control them, there are always plenty left. So every square foot of our farm has got diversity, plant diversity and flowering plant diversity in it, both intentionally and unintentionally. On the right is clover, of course, probably the most important crop on this farm and most organic farms. We need it to fix our nitrogen, so we have high inclusions of clover seed particularly in our herbal lays. And with several herbal lays sort of spread around the farm in every year, by paddock grazing them in rotational paddocks and sort of staggering the mowing for silage fields, we're able to provide continuous pollen and nectar from clover, an immense quantity really, but lacking some diversity certainly, right through from June till October or even November, depending on the temperature. So a very long period of a large amount of maybe slightly undiverse clover pollen and nectar is possible. Anna, thank you. We don't have large areas of uncultivated land on our farm, but the picture on the left there is a meadow which we love very much. It's a semi-natural, species-rich grassland, really. It's entered as a species-rich grassland at the moment, and into stewardship, and it has nice flowering diversity. Largely knapweed and oxeye daisies, predictably, but there are many other things in there as well. And all the grasses are native, so all those grasses offer really good food plant opportunities for butterflies, particularly brown butterflies in particular, which love that area. It's full of butterflies from late June when it starts flowering. Under SFI and countryside stewardship, we can supplement our flowering pollen and nectar sources with sown plants, like the crimson clover on the right, the red one, which is sown. It's growing with charlock and a little bit of runch, which is not sown. Those are spectacular examples of the weeds we can grow on this farm, but they're all contributing there to the diversity of sources in that field. But that picture is late May, so that's about as early as we can get flowering from sown plants, I think. Late May for 2 or 3 months, but we can certainly achieve that fairly easily. Thanks, Anna. Like most farms, we've got loads of hedges on the farm, and old and new hedges, and many of our hedges are dominated really by hawthorn. It's being hedges, they're trimmed necessarily, as Sarah mentioned. It's a necessary evil. We understand the impact, but we have to do it. We have to trim our roadside hedges annually for safety, and the inside of hedges are trimmed here all rotationally, as they are in many farms, every 2 or 3 years. But even then, that still limits the flowering and the fruit potential. This picture I put in because it's just a small field that we have that has a whole cluster of completely untrimmed mature hawthorn, which we just love so much. An immense amount of blossom in May and fruit in the autumn. So it's just a reminder of what a fantastic tree hawthorn is when it's not grown as a trimmed hedge. I think I've heard it said that one untrimmed mature hawthorn is the equivalent of 250 metres of trimmed hedge. It's a very general statement, but it just sort of, again, reinforces that obvious fact that restricting the last year's growth cuts down enormously on the flowering potential. So leave the hawthorns where we will be leaving our hawthorns where we can. Thank you, Anna. Next one, which is our first agroforestry picture. It's our system is primarily focused on nature recovery. It's really important. Anybody designing an agroforestry system is told straight away that they must focus on their aim, what they're aiming to achieve. And for us, nature is the crop. Nature is what we are trying to produce more of on our farm. The income for that crop hopefully comes from SFI and countryside stewardship. It currently does. And the inclusion of agroforestry in SFI and countryside stewardship was for us a really, really important acknowledgement that natural outcomes can be considered to be a crop that can have an income. There is a value to these things as a public good. That funding is not as secure as we would like it to be, given the mess everything is at the moment, but it's certainly the most important factor for our agroforestry was nature. The secondary aims are carbon sequestration. So we wanted trees that were good at carbon sequestration where possible, and also biomass. We have a biomass boiler, so we wanted to produce timber and trees that could be coppiced or pollarded for their own good in some ways, and to restrict their ultimate size in other ways, but produce a biomass chip for our heating system. So all the 8 species that we planted here are native trees because of that focus on wildlife and nature. And they all offer one or more key services to nature, either flowers for pollen and nectar, fruit for birds, and invertebrates, but all foliage as a food plant. For a lot of caterpillars and that sort of thing, we were very keen to assist as well. Some of them, some of our trees like rowan, crabapple, and hawthorn, hopefully tick all three boxes there. We get all three major benefits from those species. So all the pollen and nectar sources that I've mentioned so far, which were the ones that we really were looking at when we were thinking about what we should do, they're all good, they're all great, but they do have one weakness, and that's that none of them are available before May. Everything is May onwards, and really the peak of that is June onwards, when the clover really comes in. So we have a glaring problem with early pollen and nectar on this farm. So that was what came out of that exercise. Thanks, Anna. Next one. And that's really where these two come in. These are two of the most common ones we've planted really across the 8 species. Certainly goat willow, we've put loads of goat willow in. Both these pictures were taken last week on our farm, so they're both February photographs. So the goat willow on the left is just coming out. I had to search for flowers that were fully out, or catkins that were fully out. The hazel is fully out and has been for a couple of weeks. So they're both loaded. In the case of hazel, pollen, and the goat willow, pollen and nectar are out now at this really, really critically important time. I don't know whether anyone else did, but saw so many bumblebees today. We've had some sunshine here today in Shropshire, and it was really noticeable how many bumblebees were around. They're emerging now, and these critically important high protein sources are there waiting for them, hopefully. These are the earliest two that we have, but all our other species will follow on. So alder, poplar, silver birch, rowan, crabapple, and hawthorn, which is the total of our species, 8 species here, will all follow on with their own contribution of pollen and nectar right up until May, hawthorn being the last really. So we hope that this sequence really will give the pollinators on this farm a food source right through from February to May, when the other things, the flowering plants, either sown or natural, can take over. So to sum up, really, we're really confident that our agroforestry trees, once established, obviously they're very young at the moment, but once they're established, they'll add very significantly to the abundance and the diversity of pollen and nectar here, and help us to provide that right through from February to October, or even beyond, as well as creating a much better microclimate and habitat opportunity right through the centre of our fields. We've brought that edge habitat right into the middle of the fields and the shelter that the trees will provide, so that invertebrates can not only feed, but they can thrive too. Anna, last one. This last picture is not mine. I wish it was. I hope it's genuinely true and it was somebody's picture. But I just thought it was worth putting in, because goat willow, and we're going to see this in the next couple of weeks here, is just such a fabulous tree. It's a tree that, I mean, we hardly talked about before looking into this agroforestry project, and now we just love it so much. If you haven't got any, plant them straight away. It grows like a weed, so it's the perfect tree for an organic farm like ours. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Mark. Sorry. And there's loads of chat going on, which is great. Thank you, Bex, for sharing a whole load of great resources as well. And yeah, so anyone with any knowledge, do answer some of the questions that are in the chat. I'm going to kick off now. We've got a few questions coming right at the beginning around the sort of native, non-native things. So Mark, you said you'd chosen mainly native, and Sarah, when you were doing your initial presentation, you cited a few non-native trees, I noticed. So there's 3 people, I think, Charles, Steve and Mark all touched on this around, and native and non-native, what are the opportunities, are the risks, are the benefits, and then Steve wanted to know what are the best non-native trees for pollinators, and then there was a specific question around tulip trees and whether they're good. So I don't know, Sarah, whether you want to start with that, and then maybe others can come in. You're on mute at the moment, Sarah.
Yes, I think it's important to get this right and get the right information. A lot of non-native trees we grow here have been here for hundreds, if not thousands of years, such as sweet chestnut, and there's just so many apple trees, for example, domestic apple trees, and things like almond and peach. There's so many now, but some actually even Italian alder. So that's sort of recently been brought in, but they've been brought in very carefully with those sort of people, authorities in horticulture and things, saying these are safe and they're not invasive and they're not going to damage our native biodiversities. And this is really important. We can't just bring in any old tree. I think there are some non-natives in botanical gardens and things, and I think that's where they need to stay, because some of them just could become invasive. We just don't know. But if we're talking about the farmed environment, we're talking about wild spaces, you really just can't put any old non-native tree in. But there are some that have been here so long, you know, that I think, and the ones that are in the app for future the app for future .org.uk, these have been deemed safe by Forest Research, and I think we have to listen to their advice first. But I mean, for example, sycamore, which is a non-native, but it's been here an awfully long time, Acer pseudoplatanus, that is an extremely beneficial. It produces so much pollen and nectar. It flowers. It's insect pollinated, but it also produces honeydew for many months, so the rest of the year after it's actually flowered. I'm just trying to see quickly. So horse chestnut is also a very good one, which is another non-native. Yes, so that's my answer, really. I would be very careful about tulip tree.
You'd be careful, okay. So tulip maybe not. But interesting on the sycamore, because again, you know, planting tree, there was a question as well about the the agri-environment schemes, and planting trees is quite expensive, and getting that payback for farmers is hard, and it's sometimes hard to justify the investment. But something like sycamore actually can produce really good timber quite quickly. So if there's also a market for the timber and it's providing all of this pollinator services, then it starts to stack up and it makes more of a case, I think, sometimes for including it. So, Vicki, have you got any thoughts on the native, non-native? You're on mute as well. Everyone's very good at muting themselves. So there we go.
Yeah, no, I think a lot's been said, but I would say I know Bug Life have got a really big campaign about the importation of soil that has possible. You're bringing in potentially invasive species like some flatworms, so make sure you've got verified sources if we are importing them in soil. Same thing I'd say.
Well, and I think there's a difference between.
Just say something.
Yeah,
we must not import any trees. Absolutely not. It's a huge no-no. All the trees that we've been talking about have already been growing here for.
Great. That's brilliant.
And
yeah,
they must be sourced from plant health nurseries in the UK, grown in the UK.
Yeah.
This is so important for everybody to know. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. I was going to make the same point.
Yeah.
Mark, have you got anything to add on the native thing? I mean, you chose native this time. Would you look at other ones?
Well, we felt native was important to us. We were thinking also beyond pollination. We were thinking of food plant as well, which I think steered us a little bit more back towards native. Also landscape. It's a simplistic choice, I know, and it's a much more complicated answer than that. But it suited us. We knew what looked good here, and we wanted. Agroforestry is clearly not natural in any way, and any more than any of our other farming is natural. But we wanted the tree species to look right in our environment. So again, it's a very simplistic choice to say that. There is a little bit of snobbery around the whole native thing. Clearly, everyone has a different definition for it, and trees that have been here for hundreds of years maybe should be let in now. But yeah, it was a simple choice for us. And I think if you go native, you're right. There's certainly, as Sarah's saying, with knowledge and research, there are many non-natives that would contribute also. But we kept it simple.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. So there was a question around how many honeybees is too many honeybees? Can you have too many honeybees, and do they then start to have an impact on wild bees and solitary bees? Vicki, maybe you're on mute again.
There is definitely a problem of too many honeybees. They compete with wild bees for nectar and pollen sources. And there are issues around disease spread. And I'm talking at a sort of global level here. There's a lot of issues with the huge use of honeybees for pollination of vast plantations for instance, almond groves in America and other trees. And it's known to be a problem and a cause of when you have that many clones effectively of a single variety of insect as well, you're going to create an amazing habitat for a disease and disease spread. So there's lots of reasons for really making sure that you're not harming the wild bee populations, which are incredibly important pollinators of our crops as well. And there has been a big push for people to have honeybee hives on roofs in urban areas. And it feels good, it feels positive, and it might be if it's doing an education purpose and all that kind of thing. But much better to provide lots of flowering plants and trees for those wild bees that live there already.
Yeah, thank you. Right. So, couple of questions around sprays. So, Steve says the average farm in England is 87 hectares. In terms of restoring pollinator populations, what is the relative importance of a no spray regime compared to habitat creation? And what's the evidence if you know it? And then follow up from him, honeybee range can be up to 3 kilometres, so the behaviour as neighbouring farms can be important. What are the most toxic crops that a neighbour could be growing conventionally? Oilseed rape, orchards, brassicas, field beans, for instance. So something around the types of neighbouring farming and the buffers. I mean, Mark, how do you approach this? Because you must have that not just for the trees, but for your organic crops, and you're on mute as well.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it is. It is a real worry that we can't make sure they stay within our farm, obviously. And I think one of the problems is crops or habitats which lure insects in and then spray them. And one of the joys of being organic, so that's obviously everyone must go organic as well. Is that we're not doing that. We have that reassurance that that this new habitat that we're creating within our fields is totally safe. Much harder to do in a non-organic situation to guarantee that safety from spray drift. So it is a worry that that insects will be lured out, particularly into attractive crops like oilseed rape. I think, in the joking aside, in the non-organic world, practice is improving, and we just have to hope that it will continue to improve and that the chemicals being used are progressively less dangerous. But yeah, I mean, we're in that comfortable position of knowing that they're safe with us.
Yeah. And Vicki, you must have been researching this as part of your books.
What yeah, no, I mean, I think what Mark said was critical, really. It's the role of pesticides. We have campaigned for many years to get some of the worst out of our cropping systems. So neonicotinoids, which is one some people will know about, that is now banned. But not as a pet flea treatment, sadly. So we need to do that. But I would say that there is now, I'm trying to be positive here, the new agro-environment schemes for farmers does include going insecticide free in some of your fields, and a lot of farmers have taken that up. And so I would agree with Mark, things are changing, and a lot of farmers want to see the invertebrates back on their farms, in their farms. But obviously they're getting advice that might be connected to agrochemical companies, or is advice that, we've always done it this way. There's loads, and I think the way in which farming is changing with far more farmer to farmer events like Groundswell and many events across the country are really important, because farmers are far more likely to listen to other farmers about how to do this, how to reduce spray use or eliminate spray use in ways that aren't going to harm the bottom line. But we've done a piece of work at the Wildlife Trust called Farming at the Sweet Spot, which was looking at the books of 160 farms and showing that you can reduce your costs, like on sprayers or fertilizers, and still make a profit, even though you might have a lower yield. It's an interesting piece of work, and we're doing more going forward. But there are ways of actually still making profit while reducing your costs. And I think a lot of the costs of some of these chemicals, partly because of the fossil fuel costs, are going to go up again, sadly, in the next year. So looking at alternatives is a good thing.
Put a link to that report in the chat for us, Vicki?
Sure, yeah, Farming the Sweet Spot, I'll put it in.
Or we can send it around afterwards.
Yeah.
Sarah, have you got anything to add on that point about the sort of drift and, potential contamination?
The drift. There's obviously nothing that anybody can do, and also bees travel, don't they, miles? So, for example, organic honey is only going to be sort of on organic farms. It's going to be minimally contaminated. So we can't have it perfect, can we? It's just impossible.
But I do remember when I was talking to you in the project, you were talking about, the more you provide at all times of year near the hives, the more likely they are not to travel, and therefore the more potentially.
Exactly. The more you have on your own holding, your own farm, providing forage all year round, then they won't need to fly. They only fly distance when there is nothing available in their home patch. Okay, so absolutely right. I mean, you can absolutely save them from flying into contaminated farms. Yeah, by providing forage there at your home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Right. There's a couple of questions around whether bees choose specific bee species choose particular tree species to feed from, and then there was one around hazel does it provide for a wide range of bees, or are they more choosy? So I guess how selective are bees in terms of is it just about whatever's out at a particular time and they're hungry, they'll go for it, or do some particularly look for specific species?
I think most bees are generalist feeders, and I think that's sort of generally understood. And they're very adaptable, so they can they will just look for pollen when they want it from any tree that it's available from, and nectar in the same way. And they'll also, if nectar's unavailable, floral nectar, then they will seek out honeydew from trees that may not even have flowers, and may even be a wind pollinated tree like oak tree, for example. So they are very adaptable, and that is one sort of plus point on their side. There are a few specific bees, like there's the blueberry bee, and they'll only feed on specific plants, but that's a small minority of bee.
And Vicki, are there other pollinators that are more specific, or a lot of these invertebrates?
Many are very specific, like the hummingbird hawk moths. They've got a very long tongue to get the nectar from particularly long tube barrel flowers. Those relationships between the bee and the plant have developed over millennia to have a unique relationship. And the mouth part's obviously critical for this, and if they've been developed to be specialists. I'm trying to think off the top of my head some good examples, and my brain has frazzled. The fig tree is the perfect one, which is pollinated by the fig wasp, which is a tiny, tiny wasp. And there are a number of fig wasp species. But if anybody grows figs in the UK, they'll be aware there's a little hole at the end of I forgot what it's called, some beginning with C, which is where all the flowers live, inside this round thing beginning with C, and little hole, and a female fig wasp will go in and lay eggs around the stamen of flower. It's a very complicated and very intimate relationship. I'm writing about that in my book, and I'm saying that the tree talks to the wasp, and there's so many hormones and chemicals going on there, but it's a very intimate relationship. The fig tree.
Which I guess goes back to the point about diversity, doesn't it? That you mentioned, where the wider range of stuff we've got, the more likely we are to be supporting all of these.
Yeah, and if you've got other fig trees near you, you're more likely to have fig tree wasps around. If you're the only one, you might not get any fruit.
Yeah. Great. I've got a sneaking suspicion there's a few questions lurking in the chat that I'm not quite keeping up with. Because there was one around from Martin, and I don't know if there was a previous question, but why the promotion of tea tree for Manuka honey? Have I missed something previously on that? Maybe Martin, if you could just re-put your question in the Q&A, that would be really helpful. The importance of microplastics in pollinator design, because you mentioned it, Vicky. Do we? I mean, we've got evidence that they're ingesting them. Do we have evidence of the harm that it's doing them?
I need to look into that again because it was a while since I looked at it for my previous book. But I know that researchers are doing detailed analysis of pollen and nectar and hives. I met one who was actually doing that research for a PhD, and it's highly worrying that they're showing up everywhere. It's not going to stop until we really stop putting the plastic into the environment. And there's all sorts of ways of doing it, from plastic grass, what's the word? AstroTurf, to all the plastics that are used in our clothes. A lot of our clothes, the ones based on fossil fuels, they'll shed microfibers all the time into the environment. I mean, it comes from everywhere, Ben, as you know. So we've got to just stop putting it out there and reuse things, not get new things that are made of microplastics. But there's also, I've found research showing that the plastics in and of themselves are harmful, but they can also transport chemicals. There was a research study from a coral reef where they identified some real harm being done by bringing in a disease on the back of, because they've got a large surface area to volume ratio. There's a large surface area on which toxins or diseases can be transported, and that's a real risk, as well as the plastics themselves. So I'm very, very sorry the plastics treaty didn't seem to get signed last year. We've really got to tackle that one because it's a real whole ecosystem harm.
Yeah. Right, I've got the original question from Martin. So I'm surprised at the promotion of the tea tree, the source for Manuka honey, a native from New Zealand and Australia, where it did well even without the honeybees, which were only brought by the settlers. So I don't know, Terry, you're a big fan of Manuka.
I mean, I know a lot about them. I mean, we've been growing them for nearly 20 years, but I don't quite understand what the question is.
I think he's just surprised that we're promoting it.
I don't think we're promoting it. I mean, it's a potential. In the June gap, it's important. It provides a lot of nectar. The other thing is that it's used in hospitals, and it's been researched in real detail, because it has this antimicrobial and antibacterial potential for the superbugs, and it was found in this research to be the only substance which actually kills these superbugs, which will in the future, when there is total resistance to the ordinary antibiotics that the pharmaceuticals make now, we'll have nothing else. Now, having just promoted Manuka, I'll also add that actually heather honey has very similar medicinal properties. So we're not trying to promote, but we're just trying to open farmers' minds to the potential diversification, and really, and not only medicinal for human beings, but also medicinal for bees, believe it or not. So actually bees themselves seem to know what's good for them, and they often go for medicinal herbs as well, interestingly.
They'll self-medicate.
They'll self-medicate, and that's what actually got me into plants for bees. 20 years ago. So that's how I started on this project. So yes, I think that it's just something for organic farmers that must be as uncontaminated as possible. So it's a little project, and it has to be on small scale because, as Vicki, you rightly say, we cannot put at risk the wild bees. Okay, so and to be done success. I don't know what the organic standards actually are, Ben, but I'm hoping it's to keep it small scale, because otherwise it's going to do damage in the environment. And any large scale, I'll tell you, the most frightening idea would be a large scale honey farm run by a large company. I mean, I can't think of anything more damaging or horrific to think about for the environment. So that's all I have to say. I don't really want to promote it, but small scale organic farmers could think about it as a diversification income. That's all.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Anna, could you share the last couple of slides? I'm just going to go through a couple of slides on the App for Future tool that Sarah mentioned, which is sort of where this all came from originally. So Sarah got funding for a project to develop a farmer-facing tool to effectively, help us choose trees when we're on farm and we've got this range of hundreds, thousands of species to choose from. How do we work out what's the one that would suit us best for our soil and our changing climate and all the rest of it? So we worked together creating this tool, which was a sort of the first version, and at the Soil Association we're now working with Forest Research to develop this tool further. But the one that I'm showing you is the sort of half-developed tool, which my colleague John is now testing with some farmers. I'm just going to show you a couple of slides, and then there's a couple of Menti questions afterwards, if you're happy to fill it in. So basically what you do, you click on the map. So you can see at the top of that, there's a little pin. So that you can zoom right down to your field as well. So you can click on your farm or your field, and that gives you a location, and you can then choose these climate scenarios here. So looking at a potential change of 1.5 to 2 degrees, or 2.5 to 3, or all the way up. And then at the bottom, you can see you can also choose how long into the future you want to look at. So you sort of set these parameters, and then Anna, if you click to the next slide, that then pulls up a list of trees, which will come off the next slide. You can then tweak it. So, for instance, if you know that the field you're looking at is actually a bit drier than it says, or a bit wetter, or the soil's a bit richer, because fields can vary a lot, and the soil data that this relies on is relatively general. And then we're looking at filtering all kinds of things. So you can choose a tall tree or a short tree or one that's fodder. And so you tweak all of these filters. And then when you click on it, next slide, please, Anna, it will pull up a list of potential trees that would suit that group of scenarios you've had. And then each of those trees has all of this information behind it. So in theory, it's an interactive way to pull up a list of suitable trees for, let's say, the next 50 to 80 years. And obviously, that's all modelled, and all modelling is wrong. But we know the climate is changing, even if we don't know exactly how. And it allows you to explore some of that stuff and look at, we're trying to include a fair amount of detail, because as well as the pollinator stuff, we want to know that it's delivering, other services to the farm, whether that's a marketable crop, or shade and shelter for animals, or increased organic matter, or in Mark's case, biodiversity. So that's the tool. I'm really happy. I've John or myself, if you want to get in touch with us to talk about that, we're still looking for a couple of farmer testers. So if you're interested in testing it for us, we can pay you to do that. I think, John, I'm right in saying we've still got a couple that we're looking for. And if you could tell me, whether you were actually aware of this App for Future tool that had been developed, that would be the first question. And if you're not a farmer, I wouldn't expect you to have done, but hopefully somebody has heard of it. And it's, there we go, excellent. And we only managed within the first project to put a relatively limited number of tree species in. So the new version is going to be pulling a lot of the information from the Forest Research Tree Species Guide, which is a really good guide, which I think we're going to, if we haven't put a link in, we're going to put a link into it as well. But that's a PDF. And then the second question is, do you think the tool like this, assuming we can get it working and, you know, useful and easy to use, do you think it would be useful in helping choose your tree species for agroforestry? That's encouraging. We're not wasting our time. Excellent. While we're finishing that, there is another question about, should we be incorporating more gorse? Anyone got an opinion on gorse? No, Vicky's got no opinion.
No, sorry. I know it smells of coconut or pina colada, but it probably is very important, and it's full flower at the moment. But
yeah, and it's quite a good one to protect other trees as they establish. Yes. It's a nice
nurse tree.
Nurse tree, exactly. Yeah.
And good for definitely good for the birds.
Yeah. Great. Well, listen, thank you all very much. Thank you to Vicki, Mark and Sarah for their fascinating talks. We're going to be working with Sarah, as Anna said, on that follow-up video guide. Thank you, Anna, for your amazing work, making it all work smoothly. And thank you, John, for helping set it up. Thank you all for joining us and for all your great questions and chat. Lots of stuff happening in the chat that I couldn't quite keep up with. Anna, is the chat still available afterwards as well, or can we sort of harvest all of the links and send that through? How does that work?
I'm not sure. I don't think it's available, but fear not, because we will put all the links that have been there. I saw some people putting really interesting links, so I was opening tabs like it was the end of the world. So we will share those. And also there was some really nice conversations happening, so we'll try to summarize them and make them available as well.
Great. Thank you, Anna. Thank you all, and good night.